People have been warning about artificial intelligence weapons powering the battlefields of the future since the days of Terminator. But is that now a reality on today's battlefields of Ukraine? And just what does it mean for a certain U.S. company? I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. Let's get into it. Okay, so this is a crazy story that I've wanted to talk about for a while. AI drones are starting to proliferate the Ukrainian battlefield, and they are spiking the kill rates of FPV drones, right? These are the quadcopters with essentially anti-armor, anti-personnel weapons strapped to them that just fly straight into a target. And thanks to AI software in them, they now have their kill rates dramatically increase, going from about 50%, right? So a typical drone hitting about 50% of its targets in 2023 to now it's closer to 80%. And much of that is the impact of AI software provided by a U.S. company called Palantir, right? Who time is called the AI arms dealer of the 21st century. Now, what I think is really interesting is that, one, the reason that drones and AI drones have been so important here is because right now, the only reliable weapon system to counter a drone is actually electronic warfare, is jamming. And so you don't stop the actual quadcopter itself, but instead you sever its connection to its pilot, who is often kilometers away. And once you've clipped that connection virtually or using signal jamming, then the drone itself becomes powerless as it doesn't have any of the inputs required to fly. But if the drone didn't need a pilot's input, and even if it were to only need a pilot's input for the first 80%, right? Only when it gets inside of that spectrum jam, that electronic warfare range, then you need an AI system that can take over and finish the fight, even if the signal to its controller gets cut. And that is what has made these drones so effective, but also so desirable. Because here's the thing. It also, this 50% relies on skilled pilots. And even more troubling, it requires one pilot to one drone. Well, if you could create a sophisticated enough AI software, you could get it so that one pilot launches a fleet of 4 or 5 drones, much like aircraft launching from an aircraft carrier. Then they send the swarm in, but thanks to AI targeting, it looks more like a command and control, right? Potentially for like a game like StarCraft, where you simply say, squad of Marines, go here. Squad of tanks, go here, right? And then the AI systems run the rest of the units, right? So the potential for this for Ukraine is massive, right? Because Ukraine is short both on resources and on personnel. And an AI drone solves both, right? Wasting fewer drones and freeing up more soldiers to do more on the battlefield, right? But what's more interesting, and as they talk about, the edge of AI comes from its ability to learn, and that Ukrainian operators can actually train the software further, right? That, for example, Sacker, a reconnaissance drone in which Palantir's AI software is embedded, is able to independently identify tanks, personnel, and armored vehicles, among other targets, and then feed that information to a command post to select to hit the enemy and with which weapons, right? This is a pretty classic use of AI, right? An unarmed use of AI. But the thing is, when the AI can learn, what does a Russian tank look like? What does a Russian soldier look like? And as they point out, the drone purportedly can now distinguish Russian soldiers by their uniforms, their weapons, equipment, even the way they move after being fed countless videos of Russian operational forces. And this is pretty crazy because it's using a classic military function, which is uniformity and repeatable tactics against it. Right? So Russian soldiers who go through the training pipeline are given the same set of training. For example, in the U.S. Army, we were taught a specific way to carry the weapon, barrel pointed down, finger resting on the trigger outside the trigger guard, right? We're also taught a specific way to patrol, which is, again, along a road, it's a staggered stance, 10 to 15 meters apart. But if a drone were to be programmed with that training data, or were to observe U.S. Army soldiers operating in a long enough timeline, they would eventually be able to pick them out and say, look, they're carrying their weapons, they are moving in a way that is reflective of US military doctrine. And again, an AI drone wouldn't know that. It would simply be pattern matching, right? And that's what they seem to be doing with Russian forces. So this 80%, this is with the smallest data set they are ever going to work with. The data set's going to grow, and they're going to become more and more dangerous. Purportedly, it has a range of 10 kilometers in an inertial guidance system that doesn't require GPS, meaning it can beat GPS navigation, which is also huge, right? This has also been a tool that Russia especially has used to thwart Western weapons, right? To again jam the GPS signal, meaning that the system no longer knows where it is. Again, an inertial guidance system not going to be as accurate as GPS over long distances, but probably perfectly accurate within 10 kilometers. Again, especially when it's corresponding that with its own sort of machine vision. So this is absolutely potentially massive. Field reports said that for a new UAV pilot, the hit rate can be as low as 10%, while even experienced operators can get about a 50% success rate. And actually, according to Forces News, this is powering nearly all of Ukraine's drones for artillery targeting, and could get them up to as high as 80% across the battlefield. So this is pretty wild stuff. Now, before we talk about kind of what Palantir does, one, I wanted to mention that you guys, if you want to support this channel, you should check out combatvetnews.com. Why? Because this is my version of Patreon, and you know that YouTube has cracked down on combat footage on their platform. And so if I do my analysis of combat footage, GoPros, drone footage, YouTube won't let me show it to you. So instead, it's for members only, twice a week. We've actually just been going through a series checking out Operation Shovel from the International Legion's Chosen Company. These are the elite trench fighters of the International Legion, and they have basically their entire operation in GoPro and drone footage compiled together. It's awesome. It is the best look into a top tier assault force. So if you want that and literally hundreds of other videos dating back to the start of the war, check us out, combatvetnews.com. Become a member. Okay. So I want to point some stuff out. First off, this is the stock chart for Palantir. Palantir has a really interesting history. So that's the 1 year chart. Here's the 5 year chart for Palantir. So Palantir, what makes it so interesting is that this was founded in 2003. Originally, it was meant to help intelligence analysts. They built software that was basically AI for intelligence analysis. And the technology was actually so promising that the CIA came to the founder, Alex Karp, and said, "Listen, Alex, we will fund your whole thing. You don't have, and we'll acquire a 0% stake in it. But there's a catch. For 5 years, you can't put this out in a commercial availability. We have to own it. This will become for 5 years a U.S. government secret software." And Palantir took that money and they trained it on data sets with U.S. Special Operations Command, helping them build out maps of networks of terrorist targets. So again, they'd say, "Hey, I captured 3 cell phones, and here's a couple of names in the contact list." The name, and they would say, "Hey, here's some names and contact lists, and here's some fingerprints, and here's a couple of other numbers that they called frequently," and you would just shove it into the database. And Palantir would look across the entire theater and say, "Hey, who else has been here? Who else has done this? Who else is associated with these numbers?" And it would spit out network diagrams that said, "Okay, we think this cell phone, and here's the 5 or 6 people it called. Here's who we know they're affiliated with. Here's the other thing, and here's what we think is the org chart." And it was really good. And then, like all AI, it got better from having gotten that data set. Imagine an AI data set that, instead of being trained on Reddit shitposts, was trained on thousands, maybe even tens of thousands of elite U.S. intelligence agency networks and terror networks, right? So the result was an AI company that was at least a generation ahead of the kind of large language models we work with now. So obviously, you can imagine when the company debuted, a lot of people didn't quite get it because they build themselves as a data company. But again, nobody's complaining now because you can see over the last year, people have said, wow, these guys bring tools to the battlefield that nobody else can, right? They're 2 decades ahead of anybody else in building military applications. And that's why their stock price has been up literally up 50% up by like almost what's that? Almost 200% in the last year. So again, this is some real powerful stuff out here. And again, I can tell you, I first encountered Palantir talking to an analyst in the Ranger Regiment. This was in like 2007 or 8. And he was like, guys, this thing is the real deal. It took matching things from being, take me 8 hours, 12 hours to go through somebody's cell phones and try to match them to stuff. And I'd have to search through 50 other databases and hope that everyone else inputted things correctly. And Palantir does it in a second, right? So now, obviously, there's more to it than that. Ukraine has dozens of other companies who are all racing to create their own AI-powered drone, right? From Norda Dynamics using computer vision to even Russian companies, right? So we're seeing a huge really just a massive increase in these drones across the battlefield. And just like any other thing, like Silicon Valley in the early 2000s, when you've got this hyper-competitive landscape, what's going to emerge is some clear winners and some clear losers. And boy, those clear winners, just like any other AI system, the clear winners are going to consolidate their data sets, right? Again, these drones are never going to be less accurate than they are now because their data set, this is the smallest data set they're ever going to have, right? So again, don't kid yourself, though. Russia is going to do the same thing. They are working on the same thing. They have their own large language models. Their Yandex AI is, I don't know. I can't speak to it, how good it is because it spits out only in Cyrillic, but they have their own competitors for LLMs, and they may also be comparable in their ability to program these AI-powered drones. And if they aren't, they can always just steal the software, pull it out, and of course, they don't need to give Palantir a license because, frankly, Palantir is never going to let them have a license, right? Anyway, guys, that's all I had. Thank you, guys. Thanks especially to Bill Collier, Robin Colburn, Gaius Marning, Gina Cuesta, Chris Gorsuch, Francis Karius, AL90, Petra Tararu, as well as all of our Lieutenant tier members. Couldn't do this without you guys, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.